Alright guys, today I'm going to be walking you through my 1 million DPS sniper build, but it's a troll and it's a joke. Though the build does have 1 million DPS as its resting state meter readings. You know, I do have 1 million DPS right now without any bonuses active. As you can see here, there's nothing popped. I don't have Tack Link active. I don't have Boosted Shot. I don't have Tenacious proc. I have nothing active, and I have 1 million DPS in my resting state. This is to prove a point. Okay, this is not a serious build. I'm going to be telling you exactly how to achieve it if you want. Though this is a vanity score, this is a vanity reading and a vanity build, this is not something that's going to have practical value. The way you achieve it really fast before I talk about exactly why I've done it and, you know, the mechanics that go into this and why you should never, ever, ever pay attention to the primary DPS meter, and why the players that are coming onto build videos, you know, going across Reddit and spewing their stats as some kind of badge of honor. Well, I have 470,000 DPS, so your build is crap compared to mine. A lot of those players don't know what they're talking about. They really don't have a firm grasp of how game mechanics function. And while some of those builds may be tremendously powerful because they do actually have the synergizing mechanics, and yes, maybe their meter stats are just higher while using the proper game mechanics, probably I would say the majority of them are not. They're using inflationary stats. They don't know how the game works. They're spewing forth misguided garbage that they don't know how to substantiate or back up because they're building their characters wrong and they're relying on a meter that is possibly one of the most flawed stat indicators, one of the most flawed strength indicators in gaming to date. So number one, if you want to replicate this build very quickly before I talk about inflationary stats, exactly what they are, what to avoid, and then deflationary stats and what you want to look for. To replicate the build, you're going to have reload speed on the holster. You're going to stack reload speed everywhere. This is the biggest culprit of the inflationary DPS. You're going to stack marksman rifle damage on your gloves, crit hit damage, crit hit chance as well. You're going to stack firearms on every single piece of gear. You're going to have a firearms mod in every single slot. And then for your weapon, this is the most important, you're going to have accurate, you're going to have swift. If you had brutal, that would help as well. If you had vicious, that would help as well. All of these things are going to inflate that meter. They're going to make it higher than it actually should be, especially swift right there. And then you're going to mod your weapon exclusively for reload speed and headshot damage. Everything else you're not going to pay attention to. It's just going to be headshot damage and reload speed as the primary, and then an extended mag. And if you do that with a Scar H or a similar marksman rifle variant type, you're going to achieve over 1 million DPS. And now it's important to know that that's 1 million damage per second that it's advertising. But even when I pull the trigger as fast as I possibly can and land nothing but headshots, exclusively headshots, on a target that is 3 feet away and stationary, the gun is very hard to control. The reticle bloom is off the charts. The stability is crap. And even when I land all these shots, and even if I crit 100% of the time, it's very unlikely that I can land 3 shots per second and check off 1 million DPS. Now, moving over to any sort of realistic range, you're going to see that I'm struggling to land shots. Now, yes, there are players out there that can land more shots than me, but there are very few players that can actually substantiate a 1 million DPS meter claim with this build. And even though I'm landing a ton of headshots on a stationary target, it's still not reaching its full potential. And as soon as you introduce movement into the equation, as soon as you start fighting NPCs, you're not going to land as many headshots. And as soon as you start participating in PvP, this build becomes garbage. If you can land enough headshots, yes, you can get kills. I'm not saying that it's impossible to get kills. However, this build does not perform as what it's advertising on the DPS meter. And in PvP especially, it doesn't function well. So I'm not advertising that anyone build this. It's inflated meter DPS, and this is just to prove a point that the people that are, you know, running around talking about their weapon stats, their DPS stats, the people that don't know how the game works are at a disadvantage. Now, since this is going to kind of cover both sides of the coin, I'm going to address exactly what stats are the most inflationary. Number one, the most inflationary stat out there is reload speed. While not horrible and it does have a practical value, it does cut down on the downtime between magazines. Reload speed is going to make your meter go a lot higher than it should. It's going to mislead you into thinking that you're stronger than you are. It is good to have maybe some reload speed somewhere, but not stacking it everywhere. That's going to just inflate the meter drastically. Headshot damage is another one. Though it does have a practical application. If you can land more headshots, you can get more damage. But having just headshot damage in fights where you probably will end up landing some body shots, and you probably will end up missing some of the headshots that you're aiming for, especially in PvP, is not the practical way to build. You don't want to build exclusively headshot damage. It isn't going to make you as strong as you can possibly be. What you do want to look for is base weapon damage. If you can get your base damage higher, that's going to be really helpful. Accuracy is another one that does inflate the meter. Something like Vicious, talents like Vicious that are conditional and only active at certain portions of the health bar, especially only active when you're above 2 health segments, especially in the current metagame where you're rapidly dropping, and a lot of builds are equated to paper. They're paper DPS builds, and you're dropping health very frequently. then talents like Vicious aren't going to have as much value. So they're going to inflate your meter. When you're checking your stats in the firing range, they're going to read higher than they actually are. Now, talents to look for, switching over to the other side of the coin. Talents that you do want to look for. Things like Responsive are really, really good. Responsive is a 10% weapon damage increase when closer than 10 meters. Yes, it's not going to be active all the time, but it's never going to be active on the meter. You are never going to see Responsive reflected on your primary DPS meter because it has no way of knowing the target that you're fighting is closer than 10 meters until you've actually shot the target, until the bullet registers the damage. So Responsive is actually a deflationary talent. It takes up a talent slot while providing more damage but not reflecting that damage on the meter. A similar talent to this is something like Savage, okay? The Savage gloves provide the same sort of bonus. 7% increased crit to targets out of cover. The meter can't sense this. This is conditional. The meter doesn't understand that this is active, even though it's active most of the time in PvP encounters. So a Savage, the Savage gloves in particular, are a deflationary high end. You put them on, your meter DPS shows lower than it should be. And talents like that are what you need to be building around. Something like Unforgiving. When you're checking your stats in the firing range, a talent like Unforgiving isn't going to be active. But situationally in fights, it will activate, giving you 25% increased weapon damage. Now, if you were to check your meter stats during that fight while you had one health segment, which nobody really is, you would see a huge increase. But you're not going to be doing that, and it's something that goes under the radar. These are deflationary talents that you should build around rather than inflationary talents like Accurate, things like Brutal or Swift especially, you know, tons of headshot damage, tons of reload speed, which you should not be building around. So that's why I put out this build. That's why I've made it. Again, I don't encourage people to replicate this. I encourage people to read the talents that they're using. I encourage people to think about the build that they're using and to just cross off the DPS meter as an indicative stat point or a tool for measuring your build's efficiency. Cross that right off the list. You don't want to be using that because I can get a build that has 1,000,000 DPS and never ever achieve 1,000,000 DPS. And I'm sorry if it seems a little bit clickbaity, though I do feel that it's accurate to advertise this build as a 1,000,000 DPS sniper build. That's why I've talked about it. I made sure to make it as realistic as possible. I didn't try to trick anybody into watching this. Hopefully it's all relevant information that you guys came here to actually see or was helpful. I appreciate you guys sticking with me through this. If you want to see a follow-up to this or me talking more about, you know, building tips in general, I do want to do a general building guide and an advanced building guide in 1.6. If there's interest in that, please let me know in the comments below. Again, thank you for sticking with me through all this. If you do want to replicate the build, again, just stack reload speed everywhere, put a bunch of headshot damage, you know, roll Accurate and Swift on your gun, go all high ends with the Skulls, MC gloves, and marksman rifle damage, and boom, you can join the 1,000,000 DPS club. But I don't recommend it. I don't advise it. But hey, now I can post a follow-up comment to people that tell me, you know, my builds are trash because their DPS is higher than mine on their meter. Because now I have 1,000,000 and whatever they say is null and void, right? Wrong. Don't build around the primary DPS meter. Sorry if I'm repeating myself, but it's very important that people start to understand that there's so much more that goes into this game than just what is shown at the top of the screen for your stat points. So thank you again for listening, guys. Thank you for watching. If you want to support Upper Echelon in any way, please check out the links below. And as always, have a nice night.